Cinderella, the Grimm brothers classic turned Disney icon, with one could say too many iterations, should be buff. The character, often depicted as fragile as the shoes on her feet, would be built like a brick house. Here's why. Hi fellas, my name is Teddy Clyde, and I have too many opinions about things that do not matter. Back to it though. Cinderella should be buff. Now, you might be thinking, oh, you just want to see more strong buff women in the world, which would not be wrong. However, there's more evidence for this theory than you may think. Also, in this, I'll be looking at numerous different versions of the Cinderella character, so kind of consider her like a Frankenstein amalgamation of all of them. Secondly, I will be talking about working out / gaining muscle throughout the video, which is not a topic I know a lot about. I won't be going into many specifics, so hypothetically nothing should be wrong, but it might not be 100% accurate either, so just bear with me on that. Now, most of you have probably heard some version of the Cinderella story, maybe many times, so feel free to skip this part if you already know it and don't really want to hear it again. However, I will be going through the general Disney version's plot line so that we all have a general basis of what happens in the original story, and we can build off of it from there. Cinderella starts out as a young girl from a well-off family whose mother has just recently passed away. Now, her father decides to remarry a woman who has 2 daughters from a previous marriage. These will be referred to as the evil stepmother and the evil stepsisters. Now, Cinderella is hyped about meeting her new family until she does, and they're kind of rude to her, and it does not go super well. Then her father tragically passes away as well. Sometimes it's implied that the evil stepmother killed him. It does not really matter one way or another. Now, typically there's a time skip, and suddenly Cinderella's a whole lot older, and now she's working as a slave in her own house, doing all of the chores, what have you. She's taking this well and in stride. This is mainly the basis of her character. She's kind, she's resilient. She also decides to become friends with the just general animals who live in the house, mainly the mice, but there's birds and stuff. Meanwhile, the king keeps putting pressure on the prince to find himself a wife, which the prince does not want to do. However, the prince does agree to host a ball to find himself a wife. The invitations are sent out to everyone in the kingdom, inviting all eligible women to attend. Now, the evil stepmother sees this as an opportunity to further herself and her daughter's position in society by marrying off one of them to the prince. Cinderella also wants to go, but mostly she just wants a night off to have fun and not be a slave for a minute. Anyway, the evil stepmother agrees to let Cinderella go as long as she completes a long list of chores ahead of time, which Cinderella does. However, the evil stepsisters tear apart her dress, and then the evil stepmother's like, no, you're not allowed to go. You can't represent our family like that. She was never going to let her go. This leads to our hero breaking down in the garden, because this was her one chance to have fun and a lovely night, and it was all ruined. But wait, suddenly a fairy godmother appears to solve all of Cinderella's problems, except it's kind of only just a couple of them. The fairy godmother takes her ruined dress and turns it into a beautiful gown. She takes her shoes and makes some beautiful glass slippers. She turns a pumpkin into a carriage. She turns the mice into some footmen for the carriage. Lots of cool, fun magic things. The one condition is Cinderella must return before midnight, as all of those magical transformations that were just done will disappear as soon as it strikes 12. Cinderella then goes to the ball, in which she meets the prince pretty quickly, and they proceed to spend the rest of the evening together. They have a great time, but as the clock strikes midnight, obviously Cinderella runs off, leaving only a glass slipper behind. The prince vows he is to marry the woman who the shoe fits, so he sends out all of his palace guards and whatnot across the kingdom to try and find the person who fits this shoe. We are ignoring the fact that probably more than one person can probably fit the shoe. We ignore magic stuff, what have you. Somehow, the evil stepmother realizes that Cinderella was the woman that the prince danced with the night prior and decides she does not want Cinderella marrying the prince. So she locks her up in the attic so that when the prince's men come around to try on the shoe on all of the women's feet, she cannot be there. Now, her mice friends steal the key from the evil stepmother, and so she races back down right in time, right before the men leave. However, the evil stepmother continues to live up to her name and trips the footman who's holding the shoe, and it shatters on the ground. Then Cinderella's like, I have the other shoe, And so everything's good and fine, that her and the prince get married, etc., etc., etc. Happily ever after, woohoo! Now, you may be wondering, what part of, any of that makes Cinderella buff? Well, it does just kind of get glossed over. However, Cinderella, after her father dies, works manual labor in her house for, the better part of a decade. Now, even starting with the 1950s original Disney version of Cinderella, within the opening song, A Dream Is a Wish Your Heart Makes, Cinderella wakes up about at 6 o'clock in the morning. The clock rings at 6. She takes a couple minutes to get ready, and then proceeds to work the rest of the day until dark. It's hard to pinpoint exact dates within the movie because simply they just don't tell you, from what age characters are to what time of year the movie takes place in, which is important. So I will be guessing for a lot of this. Educated guessing, of course, but guessing. Now, if I had to assume what time of year this movie's taking place in, I'm going to say late summer to maybe mid-fall. Based off of the colors of the leaves and the amount of leaves on the trees, and the fact that a pumpkin is actively being grown and is, a reasonable size. Based off of all of this, I'm going to say sunset is about 7 o'clock, being kind of generous because it's clearly not cold outside, and if I go any later, it's going to be very more concerning. It only helps my point. So we're going with 7 o'clock, putting it at about mid-October for the time frame of when all of this is happening. Now, if 7 o'clock is when sunset is, functionally, Cinderella has been working manual labor for 13 hours a day, with probably no breaks. Now, I'm going to pull up my list to look through all the chores she has, because I cannot remember it off the top of my head, because there is too many. So, to read from it, and the chores she actively has to do within a day, that we see her do in a day, includes doing all of the laundry, scrubbing all of the floors, taking care of a ton of chickens and a horse, carrying up tea trays up flights of stairs, not to mention being told to actively work on washing all of the windows, the carpets, the drapes, clean the chimney, as well as do gardening. These are all things she is expected to do functionally every day, and I don't know a lot. If you are working that much manual labor every day, you are going to get super strong. From my own experience, I used to work at an ice cream place. The shifts were about 3 to 5 hours long, and I would normally work about 20 hours a week. Within a few months of working there, I noticed a decent amount of arm muscle growth from all of the scooping that I would do every day. And that was just a fraction of the amount of labor she was doing all of the time. Now, I wasn't super healthy. I'm a vegetarian, so I was low on protein most of the time. And I was still seeing noticeable muscle growth. Because you may argue Cinderella is probably malnourished and would not show signs. However, I do still think, even if she is not buff, she would still be strong. Not to mention how strong her legs must be from climbing up all of those stairs all of the time while carrying things. I can't imagine. Now, there's not really any other notable animated versions of Cinderella that really suit this theory, so I'll be moving on to the live action. Now, live action is a little harder to argue because the actors that they've casted to play Cinderella aren't physically buff. So we're basing this off of some of their actions and things that we see them doing in the context clues of the movies. However, it's less easy to argue because visibly they are not buff. And it's easier to argue that, well, the animated versions, that's just a stylistic choice, but they could be buff, and it's 1950s Disney, they're not going to make buff women. The men really weren't buff either, so it's easier to argue that than live action. But just kind of go with it, because there is stuff to be talked about. The first of the live-action movies I'll actually be looking at is the 2015 Disney version, which is going to be pretty much the same as the animated version with a couple of differences. Starting out, Cinderella is much older when her parents die, as they have the actress playing the older Cinderella playing the younger version as well when her parents die, which I would say at minimum she's going to be about 15 years old, as that's the youngest I think she would be. Meaning the time of her doing the manual labor, working as a servant in her house, is going to be reduced. Still is going to be a decent amount of time, but it's going to be shorter. They also cut out some of the key songs and explanations that show this. So, like, her stepmother telling her to work on chores in order to go to the ball is cut out. However, there is a scene where she is working till 3 in the morning, so just kind of that is the main thing of like, well, she is still working ridiculous hours, as we can see, but it is kind of the weakest of the live action movies I'll actually talk about. The next live action movie I'll be looking at is the 1998 movie Ever After. Cinderella will be played by the actress Drew Barrymore, but the character's name is actually Danielle in this movie. But elsewise, the plot points are pretty much the same, but there's a couple added scenes for flair. It leans into more like historical fiction than proper fantasy, but it's worth checking out if you haven't seen it. One of the added scenes for this movie is one where the prince, who's played by Dougray Scott, and Danielle encounter some thieves in the forest. They try and fight them off, but there's too many of the thieves to match up against the two of our heroes, so they were easily captured. Then the prince is like, hey man, please let the woman go. And they're like, okay. And she's like, you can let me go. However, I want my things and a horse because I'm in the middle of the forest. And they're like, you can have anything you can carry. She, being the icon that she is, grabs the prince and carries him on her shoulders. She manages to walk about, I'm going to say 20 feet down a hill in the middle of a forest with this man on her shoulders before the thieves are like, hey, actually, you can have a horse. Pretty funny of you, actually. And they let them leave. For context, Drew Barrymore is 5'4" and Dougray Scott is 6 foot. So not only is she able to pick up a man who is 8 inches taller than her, carry him on her shoulders, but she proceeds to carry him on uneven ground in the forest. Now, I have not personally tried this. However, I know carrying something super heavy and cumbersome on your shoulders on uneven ground in the forest is gotta be super hard. Up next, I'll be looking at the 2004 movie Ella Enchanted, which is a very loose adaptation of the book by the same name. Now, it follows most of the same storylines as Cinderella, but there's added, like, slavery, racism, and like curses in it. It's super silly and fun though. It's not like a harsh movie. Also, Anne Hathaway sings Somebody to Love by Queen in it, so overall, 10 out of 10. The main plot revolves around how in this universe, babies are given gifts, kind of like in Sleeping Beauty, by fairies. Now, the usefulness of the gift is very dependent on the fairy giving it to you. Our main character, Ella, is given a gift by a fairy who is notoriously bad at giving gifts. She ends up with the gift of obedience, meaning at any point if someone tells her to do something, she has to do it. Now this works to a magical degree, where in a scene where she's told to freeze while she's jumping mid-air, she is then frozen in the air. Now the commands in this movie work in kind of an intriguing way, as it is sort of implied that if there were skills that she didn't have previously to being commanded something, she does seem to retain them a little bit. Now, one example of this is early on into the movie, Ella is walking through a forest and runs into Slannon, who is an elf who's been captured by some ogres. Now, she does not know Slannon, and so obviously he does not know about her gift, but still ends up commanding her to do things, including stuff like kick his butt and rabbit punch, to then go and attack the ogres, which she then does pretty accurately. There is no proof prior to this that she is able to do these fighting moves. She doesn't seem to know what they are. She just is commanded to do them. Now, spoiler alert, jumping to the end of the movie, Ella and this ragtag group of misfits are all fighting against the prince's evil uncle's band of ninjas. Now, why are there ninjas in this medieval but early 2000s movie? I don't know. We like it. It's kind of fun. They're ninja knights. They're cool and fun. We do not know why they're here. At this point in the movie, Ella has broken the curse that commands her to do whatever she's told to do. So presumably all of her abilities will since be gone because she no longer has the magic forcing her to do things. But as she is fighting against these ninja knights, who, again, are trained assassins who are there to protect the royal family, she is able to fight them off in sword fighting and hand-to-hand combat, which she is, again, not trained on. So, it's conclusive to say that she is retaining these abilities? Maybe? So really, there are two possible versions of what this means. One is that after the curse is broken, she's able to retain these abilities that she gained from the curse, which I kind of already introduced, which I do think kind of defeats the whole purpose of breaking the curse and, like, not needing, like, any reminders of her time in that. But that's just me. Or she's just independently super strong and good at fighting, and we are just never shown how that happened or why at any point in the movie, and that's just something she can do. Either way, by the end of the movie, our Cinderella character is so strong and so capable of fighting. Therefore, she is buff. Even if not physically so, the action she is doing implies that she is. Most other live-action versions of Cinderella are modern retellings, which means they tend to take place more in big cities as opposed to farmland. This includes stuff like A Cinderella Story, Another Cinderella Story, After the Ball, Not Cinderella's Type, among so many other movies. Because of this, there is a lot less manual labor happening, because if there was the same amount, the evil stepmother would be in prison. So I won't be talking about pretty much any other of those. There's also some that I just didn't watch, specifically the 2021 musical one, and also some that I did watch that just really had nothing to add to my theory, like the Brandy one from 1997. Now, this is probably a good time to mention that I lied a little bit earlier when I said that I wouldn't be talking about any other animated versions of Cinderella. I will now be talking about one of my favorite movies from childhood, Cinderella 3, A Twist in Time. Now, I've decided to put this towards the end of the video as I don't think most people will consider this as something that counts, and that is okay. But I also think it does tend to have more evidence than most of the other versions, as it does encompass kind of the original 1950s Disney version of Cinderella, plus everything that happens in this movie, which is a bonkers movie, truly, and I will be going through it briefly now. This movie takes place a year after the original movie ended, so on the Prince and Cinderella's wedding anniversary. Now, due to some plot shenanigans, the evil stepfamily ends up with the fairy godmother's magic wand and accidentally turn her to stone. With this, they realize all of their problems in life can be solved if they just turn back time and convince the prince to marry Anastasia, who is one of the stepsisters, as opposed to Cinderella. They do this by using magic to convince the prince that he didn't dance with Cinderella and replacing his memories of her with Anastasia. Now, we're going to skip over much of the plot because it does not matter right now. At this time, the prince has now realized that he did not dance with Anastasia and he actually did dance with Cinderella. But the evil stepfamily cannot have him marry her, so to combat that, they decide to make Anastasia turn into Cinderella physically. But now there's the problem of there are two Cinderellas running around, and one of them needs to be gone for their plot to work. So what they do is shove her through a magical portal into an evil pumpkin carriage, which is now being run by a human version of Lucifer the cat, with direct instructions to make sure she dies. In this pumpkin carriage, we can see that the walls are about 6 inches thick at minimum. Now, Cinderella, while kind of crammed in there, punches and shoves her way through and breaks through these walls. Now, I've seen a handful of videos of people punching through regular pumpkins. Those are having walls about 1 inch to 2 inches thick, with about the same amount of effort, if not more, gets through them. So a regular pumpkin for an average or maybe even trained person who knows what they're doing about punching through is able to do that, and she is able to do it when it's at least 3 times thicker with minimal effort. Now, unfortunately, I will never know what it takes to be Cinderella, but I can give you a visual representation of what a regular person is like trying to do some of the things that we have noted she's able to do. Now, one of my friends suggested I do this. I think they just want to see me crash and burn a little bit, but this will be fun for all of us. Welcome to the outside, guys. It's been a little bit of time, you know, pink hair now, and it's also no longer pumpkin season, so we're gonna have to make do. Honeydew. So this, definitely a pumpkin. Definitely a pumpkin. This is what I will be punching, which is gonna go great. Oh! Okay, could have hurt more. I think I did some damage. I could feel it kind of bend under me a little bit. Fuck. It's kind of going. It's gonna keep hurting. Oh. Oh, okay, I need to stop. Okay, so as you can see, with our definitely a pumpkin, not so easy to punch through, and I have full range of motion here. Now, do I know how to throw a punch? No, but still, I got nothing. Ow. Oh. So definitely, if you like see here, like you can like press into it more than you could in like other spots. Like it is, I did something like right there especially. However, I did not break through it, obviously. Okay, so for the second feat that I'll be attempting is picking up a taller person in the woods and trying to carry them. So,
Tall person!
yay! So first we're gonna try and see if I can even pick her up, and then we'll attempt walking around, see where that goes. Okay. Oh my god.
Oh.
Okay. We got this, man.
Oh, you're really pushing me.
I'm so dumb.
You're fine.
Okay.
You're fine.
Okay. Oh my god. So, okay.
Further arm.
Further arm.
Mm-hmm.
Further leg.
Uh-huh.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Up a hill. Oh my god. Nope. Not up a hill. We're like Sadie Sink in Stranger Things. We're running off that hill.
Okay.
That very small hill.
Okay. No.
Not that, yeah.
Far arm, far leg. Yeah!
Oh my god. Kinda can do it almost. Oh my god. So as you probably gathered from the clips that you just saw, it is entirely possible for a regular average person to be able to do some of those things. But it's also not super possible or likely that they can do it with much success. So I was able to punch the pumpkin, but not super well. I wasn't able to break through. The most damage I did was bruise it a little bit. So her being able to punch through and break a pumpkin as it's moving and while she's trapped inside of it is not something a normal person can do. Same with carrying a man in the forest. My friend is taller than me for sure, but is not 6 foot. So the amount of actual weight that I had to carry was much lower than the Cinderella character in Ever After did. And I still wasn't able to do it with much visual success. Like, I was able to carry her, but for about 5 feet, and it was not pretty doing it. I also don't have access to fighting ninja knights, but I also know I could not do that. Or at least not with much success. In conclusion, this is certainly not something normal people can do, at least not super well. And obviously, in the movie clips that I did show you, she's fully capable of doing these things. To summarize, we have seen Cinderella work 13 hours of manual labor in a day, carry a large man on her back, and defeat some ninja knights. We have seen her punch her way out of a large pumpkin carriage. Now, we need to start putting some respect on her name and treating her as the buff princess that she is. Now, she may be kind and gentle, but she is also strong, and we need to treat her as such. Well, that is all for me. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of the video. I really appreciate it. Now, I have some other videos, some longer ideas that I'm looking to make in the future, including some other Cinderella ones, so hopefully that's your jam. But elsewise, if you like this video, please consider subscribing. I would really appreciate it. Comment, like, what have you. But thank you again so much.